Your supervisor probably told you, never speak and write about yourself. Well, that's true, I would say, for journal articles and maybe PhD theses, but it will not get you very far when it comes to publishing an academic book. Hello and welcome, my name is William. I am a researcher in sociology at the University of Warwick in the UK, and this is a series around my latest book, Muslims in the Neoliberal Empire. Readers want stories, publishers want stories, relatable stories. What I like with American and UK academics is that they've accepted that every single piece of work is going to be biased. There is no objectivity. Even if you talk about a field like astrophysics or maths, there is no objectivity. Because at some point, theories rely on people's assumptions. And these assumptions come from the subjective interpretation of data. So I've studied in France before switching to the UK. And in France, the school of thought is very much never study a field you're familiar with, because you will lose your objectivity. If you want to study, just go, like anthropologists did back in the days, go to some Pacific islands. You don't even know the language, but still, you're going to make a whole PhD around that, because they assume that the less you know, the less biased you'll be. Which is nonsense, because what kind of concepts and theories is a French anthropologist going to the Pacific Islands, what kind of frameworks are they going to use? They come from somewhere, right? So they will still be biased, because French concepts and theories are not, the ultimate truth. As an outsider, by definition, you cannot understand the context unless through your own prism, through your own perspective, which might not match the perspective of the people you're around, and not mentioning the risk that people are not going to trust you. So I guess this is why in American and UK sociology people have embraced things such as insider ethnography. Because if everyone is biased, might as well do fieldwork in a field you're familiar with and just disclose everything so the reader can make their own opinion. Starting with insider ethnography. What I've noticed, and I've been doing this for the past 16 years now, trust is a pillar of ethnographic work. In the past decades, people have realized that no one can be better informed about a particular situation or population than someone who's lived in that particular context. They will know the language, the challenges, the nuances, the cultural references, and most importantly, it's very likely they will already have a network of trusted people and people who trust them, who will be willing to share their insights. You can't obtain interviews, especially if you study very touchy topics, if people don't trust you. That's why the best research done on gangs, for example, is done by people who were part of these very specific gangs in the first place. Talking about gangs, Mohammed Qasim, young Muslim criminal, goes back to the criminal gangs of Bradford, with which he spent his younger years. How do they articulate being Muslim? So Islam, a framework that forbids the use of drugs, and still, they're dealing drugs as a way to survive. It's fascinating. Insider ethnography, or ethnography close to home, is an investigation within the researcher's own social circles, or touching at the researcher's own life, where their friends, family, partners, and their own biographies are enmeshed in the fieldwork, the data and the analysis, which is achieved through long-term relationships with the respondents and traveling along with them. Of course, you can be an outsider, and if you've studied enough a particular context, it's possible that you will be trusted, you can navigate this context, and you can produce decent research. At the same time, you cannot be a complete insider, because you will always find people who you cannot relate with, who will not trust you, or just because you don't tick the same boxes. So not everyone's going to open their doors. For example, when it comes to research on Muslims in the US post 9/11, lots of white researchers, despite being Muslim, had people close doors on them because they were suspected of being FBI informants. It's understandable because the FBI has been using Muslim converts as informants before. So if someone knocks on your door and says that he wants to ask you a question, it's going to be very difficult. So the key is to always keep your critical lenses on and be aware of your own bias. Because, well, people assume that insiders are sympathetic to their context. So I've seen in my fieldwork lots of things. I've met lots of people I disagree with. People stealing money, people advocating for violence. So no, it's not because we are very similar that I will agree and condone whatever wrong they're doing. But at the same time, of course, I cannot use words like good and bad because this is not what sociology is about. It's about understanding, why do these people do this? Why do these people say this or that? So I'm not here to pronounce a moral judgment. I'm here to understand, to analyze. I'm basically looking at a phenomenon. And this is why I use phenomenology, because when you are using phenomenology, the words, concepts, and frameworks of your respondents weighs much more than your own interpretations and opinions. You describe things using the respondent's own words and worldview. A favorite of mine, Abdul Khabeer, author of Muslim Cool, she considers her respondents as her teachers. She does work around her own, let's say, community and like social spaces with whom she had already like long-term connections and bonds of trust. And it's just a brilliant, brilliant piece of work. So the key is to basically be aware of your own biases. All these people I've mentioned, they are explicit in the introduction. Straight away, they will openly reveal their possible biases, where they grew up, what is the relationship to their respondents, to the field, to the context, how did they come up with their research questions. Because biases can be completely subconscious, and this is where we go to the step above, which is autoethnography. So autoethnography is when you consider yourself part of the research. Your life experiences provide data. You are the case study. You are one of, I quote, one of the many characters acting in the field. So you acknowledge that your life journey has led you to ask certain questions, your research questions, which come from some challenges or experiences you've had. And then your research is part of your life journey, your mission to answer these questions. Field notes, my thoughts, emotions or reactions are data. And this data has to be critically analyzed. So I can extract the meaning from them, and I have to contextualize them to understand broader social, political, cultural dynamics that happen around me. Part of what motivated my research, to be a bit more specific about my own journey, is why did so many friends and myself got rejected from jobs or from marriage opportunities because of either our skin color, cultural background, social economic status. So it involved interviewing my friends, reflecting on my own journey, my own experiences, feedback I've received, but also getting out of my comfort zone and interviewing people on the other side of the barrier, interviewing people who rejected either me or my friends to understand what's the logic behind that. And it's painful because, well, you are doing research and you are reliving very unpleasant experiences. You sit with the people who've literally hurt you and who've hurt your friends, and it would be very, very easy to paint them under a negative light. But again, critical lessons on, even if it was unfair, they did it for a number of reasons, and you are here to understand what these reasons were. To quote Ruth Behar, anthropology that doesn't break your heart just isn't worth doing. And just like her own research helped her to process her grief, she did research about grief. So this research I've done has, I would say, formalized and theorized my own life journey, so I could understand the traumas I went through: displacement, separation, rejection, abuse, and understand my quest for belonging. And the opposite is true when you interview people in organizations you really like. You really like them, but they all have limitations. And your job is to find these limitations. And finally, I wanted to talk about long-term ethnography. So there's two categories of researchers. And yes, I know I'm being binary and generalizing. There's always more nuance. But in the context of the academic industry, so you have researchers who research one topic for 1 or 2 years, just because it depends on the grants they receive. And there are researchers who study a topic for decades, even if they have no money for it, because this is what they believe in. As before the neoliberalization of the academic industry, most researchers will fall into the second category. You had unlimited time and virtually unlimited budget to go into some Pacific islands and study there for months, maybe years, and then come back and produce all the research you wanted. And I acknowledge that it's very, very difficult to commit to a particular fieldwork, especially if it's not trending, because it's just not sustainable. Unless you don't need to buy a house, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have any debt, and your food is all paid for, it's not always possible. And I personally have sacrificed a lot to be able to do that. And also because, I was put in the middle of my fieldwork. The way I came to the UK, all of my misadventures, I didn't really choose to be within the fieldwork, which just happened to be inside. So even if I was, struggling for money or I didn't have an accommodation, I would just, go to events, hang out with friends and take notes, because all of this was super important. And, when I was homeless, Brexit happened, the referendum. And so that was, I'm not going to wait for me to have a grant to observe and document everything that happens. This is a historical moment, and I really wanted to document that. And this may be a mistake I made. My ethnography was not conducted when I had a position at uni. I was out of work many times. I was homeless for 2 years, but still, I saw the fieldwork is not going to stop for me just because I don't have money to do research. I mean, that's because I always saw sociology as who I am. It's not a job. It's not any job. It's it was my identity. Sociology was literally my life. When you do insider ethnography, you don't do research on people. You do research with people. You share time and space with people. You eat with people and you feel with people in times of joy, in times of grief. I have witnessed charities setting up. I have witnessed charities closing down. I've witnessed people getting married, people getting divorced, parents, family members passing away. So long-term ethnography is really special because it allows you to really zoom out. When you think about your fieldwork, your respondents, the organizations you hang out with 10 years ago and where they are now, you see so many things have happened. It allows you to observe the bigger dynamics in play. How do they respond to some historical or political events? And that is very important because it allows to draw trends. Because ultimately, I believe the job of a sociologist is to try to figure out where the society is heading to. We cannot predict the future, but we can put this into parallels with some other similar events in history. So in my next video, I'm gonna actually talk about my biggest bias. How come me, who was born in a racist family, who was taught racist ideas at school, who grew up hating Muslims, got to eventually study Muslims and Islam and completely change my worldview? How did I overcome this? All the references in this video are in the description. And if you want to hear more about my journey and specifically my book, please subscribe to my newsletter. Promise there's no spam. Thank you very much for watching. And again, take care of yourselves and each other.